Now, your health, your safety. This is ABC7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. Welcome to our daily special called Getting Answers. We're asking experts your question every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we're looking forward to a conversation with California's school superintendent, Tony Thurmond. So you can post your questions on our Facebook live stream, YouTube Live, or check out our Instagram stories to submit a question. So let's get right to it. Joining me live today is State School Superintendent Tony Thurmond. Tony, I know you are so very, very busy in meetings all the time with all these changes that are happening daily. So we do appreciate you making the time for us.
Glad to do it. Thank you, Kristen.
Absolutely. I want to say that education, access, and equality, we know are some of your chief concerns. They always have been, especially when you were running for your position. You made that clear. With this pandemic, it's really highlighted a lot of the shortcomings that have always been there systematically. So let me start by asking you this. How well do you think we are doing right now with our K through 12 education in California with its over 6 million students?
Well, it's clear. I mean, this is an unprecedented situation, one unlike anything that we'll probably ever see in our lifetime. With that framing, yeah, we've had to move very quickly. 6 million students moving to distance learning. That's a tall order. And there have probably been a few bumps, I'm sure. There have been. This is not easy. But I have to say I'm impressed with the resilience of our students, our educators, and our families. We've had to move quickly to keep people safe and to close our campuses to students to promote safety. And I'm very proud of what everyone has done. I'm proud of what we're doing in distance learning to make sure that we continue to provide a great education for 6 million students.
Is there a way, any data yet, that you can use to measure how well the distance learning is happening? Because there are some 1,000 school districts, and the situation, socioeconomics, technology reach differs so much from district to district. Are you using any measures to see exactly how much kids are actually learning?
Well, we're in constant communication with all of our 1,000 school districts and the associations that represent them. Obviously, we're still trying to get through this school year. Some districts will finish in May, some in June. And so, we're still in those conversations. But overall, I'd have to give great marks to our school districts for the ability to move so quickly. That doesn't mean that there haven't been some bumps along the way. We've got a lot of students who don't have access to a computer or who don't have access to the internet. A computer doesn't replace a great teacher, but it certainly enhances the ability for them to stay connected and to provide quality distance learning. I got a task force that's working on closing the digital divide. We're asking the top companies in California to donate more laptops and hotspots. We're going to close the digital divide once and for all in California. Distance learning is probably going to be around for a long time. I want to make sure that our students now have the tools that they need to do this and to do this well.
What do you say to the kids who say, look, I really can't do distance learning because, for example, I have to take care of my siblings, right? Because now I'm the child care provider for my younger brother or sister, or maybe I have to go to work for Instacart to support my family. And if that continues in the fall, gosh, what do you do?
It's a reasonable concern, and we weren't ready. Let's just face it, we weren't ready for the pandemic. On March 13th, just about every one of our school districts announced campus closures, but that school was still open. Many of our districts needed weeks to try and get ready for distance learning, to get laptops in the hands of students, to provide training for teachers, to really ramp up programs. And so clearly we weren't ready, and the pandemic really exposed how for a long time we were under-resourced for a lot of our students and making sure that they have computers. We're trying to change that now, and we're playing catch-up. We got to do that quickly.
Yeah.
And so many of our students need additional support.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I'm sorry, you're fixing a problem that was decades in the making, really, right? But I do want to ask you, given that some districts and some kids were able to learn more during this period than others, are you looking at possibly changing the curriculum or the learning standards for next year, the next grade up, so that they address and cover anything that they didn't learn this spring?
It's probably one of the questions I get asked the most. People really want to know, how's the face of education going to change as a result of the position that we're in? And clearly, this has illustrated a conversation that educators have been having for a long time to say, let's focus more on mastery of content, what students learn, and can they apply it? And that's more important than the number of minutes that they have in seats. Now, we have some work to do to make sure that people are doing the same things, that there's the right type of equipment for students, that we're providing the right kind of professional development for educators. But I believe this is going to push us to a focus on more mastery of content, showing that students can show the practical application of what they learn. But we have a lot of getting ready to do still. We're in the midst of working on that while we're also trying to figure out how do we get ready for schools to open at the same time.
Well, speaking of opening schools, Governor Newsom a couple of weeks ago said during one of his briefings that it's possible schools might be moved up to July as for, starting the school year, the next school year. A lot of people have questions about that July reopening, such as, are you going to get the buy-in of the teachers union? Are you going to get the buy-in of the 1,000 school districts in California? Are you going to get the law changed? So where are you at with that? Is that actually possibly going to happen?
The reality is that there isn't going to be a common opening for every school district in our state. All of the 1,000 school districts make their own decisions. Their local school boards make decisions about when their schools are going to open. What we're doing at the California Department of Education is trying to answer the questions about how schools can open and how they do that safely. And we're giving school districts guidance on, again, how to do that safely. That's our bottom line. Mm-hmm. Schools aren't going to reopen early if we cannot do that safely. Mm-hmm. I really want your viewers to really hear that. We're putting safety first. We need data and science that shows that it's possible. And so for now, we encourage everybody to finish the school year through distance learning. Mm-hmm. We'll take some time during the summer to plan the opening of school. But every school district in this state is going to open at its normal timeline. And we want to provide them with more information about how to do so safely because it's going to look different. There may be students in class with masks on and educators with, a mask on and having to maintain social distance in school. So we got to pay attention to what our health experts say about what's possible. But we're doing the planning work right now with teachers, with unions, with administrators to figure out the playbook for how to make this happen safely for our 6 million students.
If a school district should choose to start earlier, whether that's late July, early August, does that mean their school year would be extended, or would they also end earlier, say by May? And if so, who pays for that?
Some school districts, there are a handful of school districts that do have a July start date because they operate on a year-round schedule. Sure. And typically they work that schedule out with their educators and their families. And so for those districts that start early, they typically end their school year earlier than other school districts. All of this gets negotiated at the local district in terms of the cost. And these are decisions that get made locally. But the reality is what we hear from many districts that they're sticking with their traditional opening dates, and that's late August or early September. But we want folks to continue to check in for updates. They can get updates at the California Department of Education website. But most importantly, they should be checking their local school district website for updates about when school plans to be reopened.
A lot of teachers are sending in comments, and one district in the Bay Area told me they surveyed their teachers, and about 25% of the teachers said they're hesitant coming back in the fall, even with social distancing and changes. Are you concerned about a potential teacher shortage?
Well, I think that data points to what many districts are talking about. Many districts are saying they expect that they may have some kind of a hybrid situation of in-class instruction and some continued distance learning. And so I think that's a likelihood that we, expect and anticipate. It'll vary district to district. I mean, we already had a teacher shortage in this state. And, we were, prior to COVID-19, we were working on some great new strategies to recruit more teachers, to train more teachers. We're going to have to hold that line and continue to do that. But that feedback that you're getting from teachers right now suggests that some teachers are going to want to work in a distance learning environment, and that we expect many districts, because they've already said it, that they may have a kind of a combination of in-class instruction and distance learning. We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to hold that thought and take this conversation over to our live stream platforms for a little bit and be back on air with State School Superintendent Tony Thurmond in just a couple of minutes.
And we're in commercial break.
All right. Superintendent Thurmond, thank you again for joining us right now. We're talking to our folks on YouTube and Facebook, and I know we all appreciate how much you're doing because this is not very easy to totally shift gears with such a massive school system all at once, and you're having to do it in this little bit of amount of time. So I want to pose a few questions from our viewers to you. You ready for that?
I'm ready, Kristen.
All right,
you tell
great.
me when.
Okay. Michelle wants to know, and I don't know if she's a teacher, but she says, how do they plan to protect the adults who work with the kids? Elementary schools are petri dishes. Will you maybe be testing all teachers or all kids regularly for COVID?
You know, obviously, it's going to be important for anyone who feels that they have an underlying health condition or some kind of risk to share that with the appropriate people at their school district. That's obviously a confidential matter, but they should share that so that we can be thoughtful. Yeah, this is a serious consideration that we've not seen before. But one of the ways that we may be able to offset that is if we can accomplish having smaller class sizes, fewer students to a class, so we can create space and distance for our students. If school opens and we're still in the place where we're not given an all clear from our health experts, that means that we're going to have to maintain the 6 feet of distance and that people will have to wear a mask to school. And so we're working through those scenarios. We're working hard to make sure that we can keep everybody safe. A lot of school districts are already talking about whether or not they'll take temperatures for students and staff to see if someone has a fever or some other concern from a health standpoint.
All right. We have 20 seconds before we go back on the air. So here's your water break, which is what I'm actually going to do right now as well.
Thank you.
All right.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
And we are back with State Superintendent of Public Education, Tony Thurmond. Nice of you to join us and answer some of our viewer questions. I want to pick up from when we come back in the fall. Talk to me about what kind of measures we might see. What might a typical school day look like? And I know it's going to be a different answer for a high schooler versus maybe a K or first grader, but give us a sense of how it could be very different from what we've had before the pandemic.
You know, many schools are considering the possibility of having rotated schedules each day, that there would be a morning shift for some students and then that there'd be an afternoon shift for other students as a way of keeping the class sizes small, right? If we have to open and we don't have an all clear yet from our health officers about the COVID epidemic, the pandemic, then that means we're going to have very small numbers of students in each class. And so, school districts right now, as we speak, are thinking through what those would look like. And what my office is doing is literally talking to teachers, principals, coaches, administrators. I want practitioners to help inform the guidance that we are putting together. Anyone who wants to share ideas can do so at covid19@cde.ca.gov. We have a number of task forces that are working on this, and it's really teacher-driven, practitioner-driven, people who work in schools. And so, but we expect that there'll be smaller class sizes if we have to open in a social distancing kind of way.
All right. I know with regard to grades or pass-fail, this semester you left the choice up to school districts, although you gave guidance for sure to consider the socioeconomic situation, the remote learning situation. But I'm getting some questions from people, a lot who felt like maybe their child might be disadvantaged if they were not getting a grade. Here's one from, actually, you know what? We have one from a student that let's go ahead and play right now.
Superintendent Thurmond, my name is Benjamin Thal and I'm a junior at Woodside High School. And while I completely understand my district's decision to make it pass, no pass in order to relieve student stress, it kind of built up a lot of stress for me. Not only because I'm watching 80% of the other school districts in California give out grades, and this could very well affect my future with colleges and further. Can you guarantee that colleges will either completely wipe out the second semester or not compare me, who a pass no pass student, to a student who had grades? Because if you can't, then it just won't be fair at all. Thank you.
All right, that student is a junior and has worries that since his district elected to not give out grades, he could be hurt in the college application process. And I do know that you guys don't make policy for UC or Cal State or colleges, but I know you're always working with them in concert to make sure there's an even, playing field, if you will. What can you say to the students who might be worried about that, they could be disadvantaged? And what if this were to continue in the fall with distance learning?
First of all, I want to thank the student for being responsive and sending in the question, and to say not to worry, because we've been working very closely with our partners in higher education. Every single California institution has said that they will accept for this year coming pass, not pass grades. They've suspended the use of the SAT for admission. Students have been allowed to take AP exams from home. Our higher education institutions understand that the impacts of COVID could go well into the fall and well into next year. And they've already given assurances that no student will be disadvantaged or punished for a situation that's completely out of our control. So while our students this year, our seniors, cannot graduate in a ceremony right now, we're proud of them that they will graduate and they can be accepted to the CSUs, to the UCs, and to private colleges and universities in California. We expect those conversations to continue beyond this coming school year and into the following year. Our students will be supported and they will not be punished because of the impacts of COVID-19.
There is the issue of not being punished due to circumstances beyond their control. And then as superintendent, there's the matter of you wanting to make sure that each student does learn, right? That their graduation diploma isn't meaningless, that they actually learn the content. I'm seeing a couple questions from teachers saying, look, if this is still the case in the fall, what do? We can't keep passing students who aren't there, for example, if they don't log in, they don't show up, and who aren't actually learning.
My office is in the process of working with kind of mental health providers and social workers to really identify those students who haven't logged in, who haven't checked in. We know that a lot of students are in search of basic needs. And even though our schools are providing meals across 5,000 sites, we know that there's still some students who are still not connected. And we're going to be working hard to see them connected to school. And we believe that when it's all said and done, we'll be able to get clarity around how we're measuring learning. We'll be able to get the bumps ironed out as it relates to distance learning. We'll be able to get more computers in the hands of our students so that they can be more connected to what's being provided through distance learning. And so it's a rocky time. I don't want to undermine how difficult it is. It is not easy, and it is not perfect, but it is the best that we have, given keeping students and their educators safe. And we're going to continue to improve the process until we get it all right. And we're going to make sure that all of our students get a quality education that you can expect. And guess what? We're asking educators to help us to design that. And many, are providing their feedback. We do at our Department of Education 3 webinars a week for educators on how to do distance learning. As we shift back to in-classroom instruction, we'll also make some adjustments on how we support educators going forward.
I know your office has been working with big tech companies such as Google to ensure that kids get Chromebooks. I'm getting a question from Edward who wants to know, do we get to keep those Chromebooks?
That's my goal. To me, this pandemic has exposed something really embarrassing about California, that with all of our resources and access to technology, we have 1 million students who don't have access to the internet. I think that's unacceptable. And so as we help students get tools to be able to respond successfully during the pandemic, we're trying to overreach and say, let's use our response in a way where we once and for all close the digital divide. So all of our students have access to a computer, and we want internet connectivity to flow like electricity. And so to me, that means if you really want to close the divide, students should be able to keep those computers. And so we're working through those scenarios. We literally have hundreds of thousands of students who we've surveyed their school districts. We know what their needs are, and we are working with California companies to help. And anybody who's listening who wants to help can send us a note at donatech@cde.ca.gov, and we'll keep working on this until we've closed the digital divide.
All right, Superintendent Thurmond, let's go ahead and continue this conversation over on our live stream platforms for a couple minutes, and then we'll be back here on air on ABC7. All right, Tony, I have a question from Renee, who has a question about special education. They want to
Yes.
know what your plan is to ensure kids in special ed are still learning. And I also did actually read, you were talking about the situation in Hawthorne. I think you were quoted in an article in LA where, you know, their situation is so different from their neighbors across the 405, and they said they haven't gotten any special ed services, so they're on their own, and that's what's happening in their district. That's their reality. What are you doing to support all the school districts to ensure that, you know, if you're a special ed student here, you're not getting something totally different from a kid, you know, somewhere else?
We're happy to work with anyone who identifies an issue where we can connect them back to the district to make sure that they're being connected. The reality is that the way we've set up this distance learning, you can even deliver special education programs through distance learning. We do a webinar every week for educators on how to deliver special education through distance learning. And so while it's a challenging time, this is still a time that we want to ensure that students with disabilities are being given access to a great and quality education. And so we're happy to connect them to some of our counselors if they need help connecting back to school. And we're going to work with the districts to make sure that all of our students are getting great service in special education and across the board.
Great. How much time do we have with the superintendent when we come back on air? About 4 minutes? Okay, great. Was there like a 30-second, 5 minutes? Okay, okay, great. Whoa, there's so many questions. Seriously, education is one of the pillars of, you know, what everybody wants to know about when we're trying to do in-depth reporting on. So anytime you have something you want to talk about, you got an open invitation. All right, here we go.
Thank you, Kristen. I'll come on as often as you invite us.
All right, here we go. And we are back with State Superintendent of Public Education, Tony Thurmond. I got to ask, Tony, we know huge budget cuts are coming to the state of California. Yes. There's no way education can escape it altogether. And what is your view with regard to fighting to keep, you know, student-teacher ratios, and you're trying to do big things like get digital technology to everybody, and all this costs a lot of money, and social distancing, that costs money, new protocol at school, that costs money. How are you going to do that facing the reality of losing billions?
We are looking at some tough financial times, you know, lost revenue because of the impacts of COVID-19 on our economy. Our schools in this state get money based on sales tax and income tax. And we know that this has been hard on Californians and Americans who are unable to work. And so we want to do what we can to help them get back to work, but only if we can do that safely as it relates to their kids. And so obviously we depend heavily on our federal leadership, and our federal, you know, Congress has been great to California, but we're going to need more federal support to help us with getting devices and with ensuring that we can keep cuts away from California schools. It's a tough time. We're in a place where we need to make sure we can keep all of our teachers and staff and serve all of our students in a social distancing way when school reopens. Is
it your view that if we're still doing remote learning, that allows you to have a smaller or bigger teacher-student ratio? In that, do you think, oh, well, we're online, so I guess one teacher can teach to 50 kids? Or do you actually think, nope, kids actually are not learning as well, therefore they need more one-on-one and more teacher support?
Regardless of its distance learning or in-class instruction, I always think that the smaller the ratio, the better. You know, there's nothing more special than the educator who helps to unlock learning and engagement opportunities for all of our students. And I think that is the same whether it's in distance learning or whether it's in-class instruction. And so I've always been an advocate for smaller class sizes. I still think we need to focus on that, especially if we're going to open up in-class instruction in a social distancing environment. But we're going to do all that we can to support our educators, whether they're doing in-class instruction or distance learning or some combination. We expect that many schools will be doing a combination of both.
Anita has a question. She wants to know, will you consider changing the funding that districts receive for daily attendance? Basically, you pay for each kid who shows up and sits in their classroom, you know, at their desk. But if the schools are open, but some parents still opt to keep their kids home a lot more than usual, can the state maybe soften their funding formula that includes daily attendance?
You know, going back to March 13th, Governor Newsom issued an executive order that essentially said that school districts can receive full funding regardless of the actual number of days or attendance that students have. That was very important because clearly we're seeing there are many students who can't directly connect. And so, this is a conversation that moves us away from just counting days and seat time, but says focus on, what students actually learn in the mastery of content. And so right now there are conversations taking place about the possibility of a kind of hold harmless situation to see if school districts can be given the type of revenue that they would normally have received around their attendance, because we know that there will be spikes in attendance.
Right.
And as much as we work hard to make sure that every student is present, we also know that we've got to have some flexibility for our districts because they can't afford to lose any revenue. They need to be able to hold their revenue, and we're going to work with them to be able to do that.
All right. I've talked to a couple of local superintendents who, say they each had to design their own remote learning curriculum, and that early on, there wasn't a lot of state guidance. I assume you are working now with all the stakeholders to design a curriculum for the fall?
Yes, we, immediately on March 13th, when the governor delivered his executive order, it called on our department to essentially within a matter of days start providing guidance, which we have met within a matter of 2 or 3 days to provide that guidance. But many districts did the right thing. They started planning ahead. They started thinking about what worked best for their community. And we literally at times have met with all the county superintendents of education. We've met with the associations that represent 1,000 school districts, and we'll continue to do that. And right now, as we are laying out a framework for how reopening of school works, many superintendents are planning, but we're also in consultation with them to give them feedback and guidance and to listen to them, to listen to superintendents, to listen to our teachers, to hear from them. All of our webinars are really driven by educators, by classroom teachers and classified staff and others who help. We've even put together a virtual support circle to support our educators because we know this is a hard job. And I want to say thank you to all of our educators for what you're doing. I want to acknowledge the resilience of our teachers, our students, and our parents, because this is really hard stuff. And we've even done a virtual support circle for our parents to let them know that it is okay to just do your best. And we thank them for what they're doing on behalf of their students and the partnership that they're making with their teachers. We'll continue to listen to teachers and educators and work together to build out what the coming school year is going to look like.
All right, Tony Thurmond, thank you so much for your time today. A couple more questions that will take over to our live stream platforms, including whether there might be athletics in the fall at your kids' school. So you want to join us over there, back on ABC7 in just a couple of minutes.
In break for 2 minutes.
All right, I can't tell you how many questions I got with regard to athletics and sports and high school sports and if that's likely to happen. What is your best guess on that?
The reality is that we are talking to those who are the commissioners for, school athletics. I think this is a tricky area. And, if you just follow what's happening in professional sports, I don't think that there's any template yet that has been determined for how to have students safely engage in athletic activity. I mean, there's contact. And so this is one of those areas where we have to be cautious, proceed cautiously, and wait to see how things progress with our progress on COVID-19 and flattening the curve.
How much time do we have left before we come back on air, guys? 1 minute. Okay, so I guess this is the last question I have to ask you. Do you worry about the widening gap between those who have wealth and those who don't, and those who are in private schools, right? Many of which move quickly to remote learning, and every kid had a laptop, and they go from 8:30 to 3:30 every day in Zoom meetings, versus the kids who are not doing that. How worried are you that that gap is never going to be made up?
Well, I worry that we've had this gap for decades, and that even prior to COVID-19, we were dealing with an achievement gap. And I think it's fair to say that that gap is exacerbated by these circumstances. In some districts, students just haven't had enough school time because districts are getting set up where students aren't connected. And these things can exacerbate, the loss of learning and learning gaps. And so one of the task forces that I've created has educators on it who are putting plans together to help districts figure out where can we do more to make up
Thank you, Superintendent. I hate to cut you off. I got to go back on air. Thank you so much for your time. All right, we are back. Let's quickly recap some headlines from our conversation today with the superintendent of California schools, Tony Thurmond. We thank him for being here. He says every district will open at a different date. It's up to them. No student will be punished for being subject to things like pass-fail. Thurmond says many districts are looking at a hybrid of distance learning and in-class learning this fall. He also says many districts are looking at smaller class sizes and rotating schedules. They're working with companies to donate more electronics, and they do have a task force set up to accomplish all that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Getting Answers. Take care. All right, we're clear. Superintendent, I want to thank you for your transparency, openness, and information. It's not easy, I get that, and people have questions, so appreciate it.
Thank you, and we're going to get through it, and thank you for covering this.